listen, you're taking too long, and I got energy and a lot of thoughts. So let's do this. Why do I have a lot of energy? It is because I have taken copious amounts of caffeine today, and I got a lot of sleep. So I feel like those two things, those are probably the two biggest variables, unless I took math. That would probably be a bigger variable. But for my sake, within reason, the two biggest variables that lead to a high amount of energy, I have hit both of them in critical mass. I think like 9 hours of sleep and a bunch of caffeine. And by a bunch of caffeine, I mean like pre-workout, Monster, and some tea, because tea has caffeine in it, even though it's probably a rounding error for my total consumption. Also, really quick before I get lost in the sauce, this is take two, by the way. That's kind of one thing. And number two, in regards to the language thing, which you said in your last video, which I kind of didn't respond to, there's kind of two reasons for that. One, I started responding to it, and then through the iterations, it got lost. And the reason it got lost was just because, like, it's not really my forte. I don't as you probably know, I'm not a huge language guy. It's not something I put a lot of time into understanding or caring about for an individual language, even English. Systems of communication are cool, but those are pretty universal. What nouns we use for a language are kind of interesting. I do love interesting facts, and there are some components to language that I find really cool, like the frequency in which certain ideas pop up in a language, like a frequency analysis of a language to determine what concepts were very important to people or very important to cultures. That kind of stuff is really cool, but it doesn't really have much to do with actual language. It's more the meta-analysis. So anyway, feel free to hit me some cool points you find in there, but I kind of got lost in the sauce of my last video. It just didn't survive the iterations because it's not super my thing, so I didn't have a ton to add there. Now back to the topic at hand, but why I'm making this video. Energy, motivation, and drive. One of those, probably something I talk about more than anything else when it comes to introspection and these videos to myself. The processing self-motivation and motivation in general is a perpetual background task for me at this point. And I have new findings, not due to this background process providing me a revelation after working for 2 months, but due to my unbelievable amount of caffeine consumption. I have a new mental model for energy. And this is, I don't know what I'm going to call it, either the energy spectrum or the depression mania spectrum, because on one hand you have depression and on the other hand you have mania. Now, these might have I'm kind of stealing them from the clinical world because it illustrates what I'm trying to communicate really, really well. I don't know if the definitions are at all one-to-one or very good, but I think for my sake, it illustrates the idea of you can being depressed and being manic are mutually exclusive, and they kind of describe the same thing along the same spectrum, because if you're depressed and you get more manic, you're actually just returning to the mean, and then as you keep going, you just become manic, and that holds its own host of problems. So I think I feel pretty good about the spectrum of this one. This is one I feel pretty good about. Now, personally, unsurprisingly, I am undeniably closer to the depressed side of things, and this is actually also true for my family, which is pretty interesting. I was having this conversation with my dad, and so there's probably he fully agrees that basically everyone in my family is kind of definitely more low energy, low emotion. So it might be a genetic component. I haven't looked into that yet. I might do it this weekend, depending on my energy level. I have the interest for finding these things out because, like I said, this kind of stuff is a constant for me just because I find it interesting and highly impactful for my life. And so if I have some motivation this weekend, I will definitely check it out. But I have to do some exploration, and might get back to you depending on what ends up happening. Now, I would say within this kind of spectrum, you will have your own spectrum of the band in which you will kind of exist within reason, barring other stuff, and that's due to a multitude of variables. As I've kind of realized, one of those is genetic, but basically within this broader depression mania spectrum, you'll kind of sit somewhere, and then within that spectrum, you'll kind of bounce around depending on your diet, what you have to do that day, those kinds of things. Whether you're on vacation, that'll put you in a new place. These kinds of things will affect your smaller spectrum, your internal movement within your spectrum and the movement of your spectrum. What I have done recently today, as I've kind of realized, is when you take copious amounts of caffeine, I think you hit both. I will push myself as far manic as possible, giving myself more energy. And then also with the quantity I took, because I did a lot of things, I probably also pushed my spectrum more manic. So I'm the most manic I can be within my given environment, and I've pushed my spectrum to the right due to external, a high amount of external stimulus. And what this has done is it's pushed me from depressed to slightly, probably a little manic, just above average in terms of the energy levels, which is really funny to me because like this is like a healthy amount. I'm like, this is good. Maybe, yeah, above average, probably 30th percentile in terms of energy levels, if I were to try to quantify it. And it has some really interesting effects because I've rarely, if ever, been up here with like this level of energy. It has some really cool effects, like I'm able to proactively produce a video as opposed to reactively responding to your videos. It's very interesting. I feel like the drive to record myself, to write a script, which I've done because I want to keep track of my thoughts because my mind is racing, which is another kind of side effect, which is neutral-ish. I'm used to thinking really fast, so it's okay, but I have the energy to utilize it. That's really interesting. So that's a positive. And on the negatives, I've actually super noticed. To a lesser extent, a little bit of anxiety, but as just with no apparent cause aside from the fact that I just have the energy to be anxious. It's very, very minor. The one I have noticed to a significantly higher degree, and this one is probably, again, still under, but maybe I'm probably just hitting average for this, but I have like an unbelievable or an unreasonable amount of self-consciousness given everything that's going on aside from the caffeine consumption. And it's probably just an average amount of self-consciousness, but I am usually so low energy that I don't really have the energy to be self-conscious, so I'm just not. And now I am. Everything I'm being self-conscious about is not really new. It's just kind of like I don't have the energy to like be self-conscious. Is kind of the reoccurring thought I'm having. The kind of things like, I actually really like my career prospects. I'm enjoying my job. I like working it. It's going to probably pay pretty well. It's decently prestigious, or it's not super prestigious, but like, it's an academic job, and I like the idea of being like, or it's a desk job. It's a white collar job. It's a high quality white collar job. Those are like, that's my kind of stuff. And I'm definitively working my way to being one of those people. That is awesome. But, for whatever reason, I feel like I'm kind of underperforming in the professional front. Maybe it's due to the fact that I haven't really started anything with the ability to monetize my enjoyment of philosophy and introspection. I guess now, if this was my new average, I'd feel that a lot more, but I'd also have the motivation to do something about it. So that'd be there's some stuff going on there. This is kind of one of those moments where I know I'm going to return to normal as I'll get into bed tonight at 9:00 still, and all of this will just, actually, who knows, maybe I'll experience a little bit of insomnia. That'll be very interesting. That's never happens to me, which I guess that's just, one of those things that kind of indicates that I'm definitely more of a low energy, high sleep, kind of thing. But I feel like an underachiever. My hairline is another thing that just kind of popped up. Maybe it's because it's gotten worse because I'm drinking a lot of energy drinks and wearing a hat. I'd pull my hair back, but I feel like, I'm a little bit self-conscious about that kind of stuff. So we'll just leave it nice and down and protected of my big ass forehead. I don't really know if they're bad or they're worse or something. I just feel these ways. This next one is visual, but like my size, I hate being sticking out. My size, I don't really care about my weight, but for right now I do. My size, that one's self-explanatory. No more comments there. My teeth color. I don't think I have particularly yellow teeth, but they're not perfectly white either. That kind of matters, I guess. And then caffeine consumption. And it's like throughout this evening, I've had like nothing proactive to use my energy for, and I've just been like, like taking a shower. It's like, my mind wanders. I'm gonna be self-conscious in the shower. And I'm rotating through a list of flaws I knew I had, but I didn't really care about until this instant, and some are hitting me harder than others. And it kind of is really interesting because it hits on one of the long-standing questions I've had about fueling yourself emotionally, fueling yourself motivationally with a negative emotion. So like I'm feeling self-conscious about X. So for example, really simple example, I'm feeling self-conscious about my career prospects. I am going to use that to start a YouTube channel about philosophy, and I'm going to monetize it. And it's occurring to me potentially that it's actually so like you acquire you get motivated through some means, and you now have the motivation to do stuff, but as a byproduct, you are now just going to be more self-conscious because you have the fuel to support your self-conscious telling you that you're inadequate, or your anxiety to theorize about the the dooms that are approaching. It's definitely something I'm going to stew on. I don't know how convinced I am of it. It's kind of as I think and look back at the last couple of hours and how things have gone. I think that's my rant for today. I've recorded this once before, just kind of getting into the mind space of doing this again, sitting at my desk, and I had some interesting thoughts after, which I might look at if I still have the recording. Anyway, to close this one out, hopefully this gives you a kick in the rear to record another video, because, I mean, imagine getting outpaced by me proactively. I proactively produced 2 videos, I reacted to one, and then I proactively generated another. You're getting outpaced by me, and you're supposed to be the one having the easy time over in Europe. Anyway, I miss you, buddy. Talk to you soon, and later.